All right, so we're recording. We're going to finish chapter 8, and then your exam will be available to you at 4 p.m. today and close Monday at midnight. So we were talking last about aggression, really, and how to, so childhood aggression and emotional, social development. And now we're moving on to gender development, or gender typing is what it's called. So, first, gender stereotypes. Preschoolers associate toys, clothing, household items, occupations, behaviors, and more with gender. Um, they operate as blanket rules. So their stereotypes are pretty rigid. Um, we have these as a result of our environment and, of course, our cognitive limitations. So basically, we don't understand at this age between 2 and 6, uh, you know, that that we can share um, uh, different qualities or traits of uh, sex specific uh, uh, attitudes, opinions, behaviors, and so on. And we don't yet at this point associate the idea. We think that a gender is also the same thing as sex. So what influences our gender development? Biological influences. So we've talked about this before. So the idea behind the parental investment theory is that there was a division of labor based on sex, that the males of our species, thousands and thousands of years ago, would have these particular roles, these responsibilities, and then the females of our species would have others. And this aided in our survival. Other biological influences would be our hormones. And so, how hormones work essentially is that if we have testes, then we are going to be secreting large amounts of androgens, which is going to masculinize not only our bodies, but also our brains. And how does that work? What is it doing? It's essentially producing more nuclei or clusters of cell bodies in a particular area or areas, depending on what you're looking at, what kind of behavior or what kind of um, cognitive style of thinking. It's going to have an impact on the development of more neurons and how those neurons are organized in our hypothalamus. Environmental influences, of course, our family, our teachers, our friends, and then the broader social environment. So, males, evolutionarily speaking, right? Our ancestors would aggress to compete for mates. Females would raise children and be responsive to the males and the children, and essentially the whole family. Preschoolers increasingly prefer same-sex peers and gender-typed activities. Boys we see are more active, more competitive with larger group play. Girls are quieter. They prefer quieter activities involving cooperative roles. I'm the mommy, you're the daddy, that kind of thing. The prenatal androgens, that's what I was speaking to earlier, it's linked to gender bias preferences for toys, play behavior, playmates. And so, how do we know this? Because girls who are exposed to large amounts of androgens prenatally uh, typically prefer stereotypical boy toy preferences, as well as play types, so the rough and tumble play. So, our parental influences on gender typing, parents' expectations, right? So, the boys, it's been traditional that we would want high achievement, high competition, and emotional control. Girls, high in warmth, politeness, and they're closely supervising the girls' activities. But, and this is very important, there's greater expectations of boys to conform to the gender stereotypes than the girls. If a girl wants to throw a ball, we're like, have at it. But if a boy wants to play with a doll, we're like, hey, hey, knock it off, right? Now, of course, things are getting better, things are changing. We're learning that there's no association between toy preferences and um, future behaviors, we'll say. Parenting practices, parents will choose the toys for their children at a very young age. They'll dress the children uh, for what they think is appropriate. Girls in dresses, and boys in suits and whatever, right? We will also reinforce. stereotypical behaviors or ways of thinking and feeling. Um, will reinforce it. So we see a girl behaving, politely and kindly to her doll, and nurturing her little pets and whatnot. And well, oh, look at, isn't that cute? Isn't that cute, right? Boys, hey, look at that. Look how far my son can throw. That kind of thing. All right. So some indirect cues. So we're not doing these. We're not producing, and others aren't producing these things explicitly, intentionally. The voice stereotyped generic statement. So we're exposed to different kinds of languages, or not languages, but um, messages. And so they may not be talking directly to us, but we see those things and hear those things. Same-sex peers, they positively reinforce one another's gender types play. So girls will reinforce other girls. Oh yeah, let's go. That's great. Boys, let's go grab that and climb that. I don't know, something, right? Will often criticize as children cross-gender activities. You're a sissy for playing with a doll, or you're a tomboy for, I don't know. You know what I'm talking about. We will develop in-group favoritism as a result. Our everyday environments as children, the media, right? So what we see in games and in our cartoons and the shows that we watch and the songs that we listen to and all sorts of things like that. Leisure activities. We know that in the media, like for television ads, you'll see, a man wearing a suit who's got to go to work, and then a woman's got to take care of the, whatever the household chores. We see these stereotypes maintained. All right. I don't care about this. No. Okay. So we can skip that. Okay. Transgender children. Used to be called, I think it was called gender dysmorphic disorder. But then people with transgenderism are like, well, it's not a disorder, right? So don't say that. So the current thing is gender dysphoria, which is being unhappy, dissatisfied with our natal sex, or what we were born as, and strong identification as the other sex. It affects 1.5% of boys and 2% of girls. It emerges in early childhood, and then it expands and deepens in adolescence. And it usually persists for children who are severely troubled by the mismatch. Um, they insist they are the other gender, and they engage in high levels of other gender behavior. So what do we do? How should parents respond to that? If a child, it's funny because I just asked my 15 and my 13-year-old, my 15-year-old daughter, and my 13-year-old son, what would you do if your kid, say your 5-year-old, said, I'm a girl when their sex is male. And at first they were like, well, but they're not. So I don't. And I said, well, yeah, but what would you do about it? And they said, well, I would just say that they're whatever. I said, but how far would you go? I'd go as far as, and this is how they responded. I'd go as far as they wanted to within reason, as long as it's not causing them harm. I would go along with it because it's theirs. It's their identity. So what should parents do?
Probably just be supportive of their children and try to understand them.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe have a conversation with how they about like with them about how they feel, and maybe ask them questions and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe follow with how they feel. Like, so if they choose, or if they feel, or not if they choose, but if they feel like they are a different gender than what they are, then go along,
Mm-hmm.
adhere to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically. That's basically it. So when we put efforts to suppress or deny that it causes them distress. So the associated risks from childhood on are family rejection, social ostracism, unemployment, poverty, homelessness, depression, suicide. So health professionals recommend therapies that permit children to follow their gender identity inclinations and help parents protect the children from negative reactions. Embracing expressed identity fosters better adjustment, meaning they do better behaviorally. Okay, yeah, go ahead. Love you. Bye. So I kiss my son too. Have a good day. So, how do we reduce gender stereotyping? Delay exposure to stereotype messages and language and in media. So, don't expose them to things that they're not, that they shouldn't be thinking about yet, right? Let them discover it on their own if that's what they think, right? Limit traditional roles in their own behavior. Provide non-traditional models. Encourage mixed gender activities like t-ball, right? When you start baseball and softball, you start in t-ball, and that's a everybody plays in the same team. Once they are aware of stereotypes, point out the exceptions. Now, this is an important part. Now, this moving on from that, now we're just going to uh, parenting styles or child rearing styles, right? So the combinations of parenting behaviors that endure across situations, that's what we're talking about. What kind of what kind of parent are you? So the features that differentiate the more effective or less effective styles are acceptance and involvement, control, and autonomy granting, meaning letting them do their own thing. So here's what I want you to know. You want to be an authoritative parent where you are high in acceptance, high in involvement, adaptive when it comes to control, and it's appropriate autonomy, meaning you know when they should be able to do things on their own. You know what you should be letting them do and what you should not be letting them do on their own because it could be dangerous. Authoritarian. Now you're like a boss. So you're not accepting, you're not involved, you're high in control, and they lack autonomy. Then you're a permissive parent, high in acceptance, too low or too high involvement, low in control and high in autonomy. Uninvolved, you're just low in acceptance, low across the board, involvement, control, and you're indifferent as to what they should or should not do. So the outcomes of child rearing styles, again, we want that authoritative, like, and that just means I'm the authority. I'm the parent. I'm the one responsible for you. And so with that parenting style, the children result with more self-control, more social and moral maturity, a higher self-esteem, authoritarian, where I'm the boss, right? I decide. I watched a movie yesterday for the first time, and I know this is going to be like, what? Aren't you like 100 years old? The Dead Poets Society, right? And that was all about these children or adolescents, I should say, adolescents in this preparatory school who had these parents who were very authoritarian, right? They had these incredible high expectations and like they wanted to write for the school paper, they wanted to be in plays and the parents were like, no, you need to take your classes, focus on your studies so you can become an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, right? So what ended up happening in the movie is, one of the kids killed themselves, right? So that creates anxiety, unhappiness, low self-esteem, anger, defiance. Now, if you raise children, which ultimately are going to, in a permissive way, they're going to be spoiled, right? They're going to be impulsive, disobedient. They have lower school achievement. And then if you're just, neglectful, if you're uninvolved, the children are going to be depressed, poor emotion regulation. Um, they're going to again have school problems, and then they're going to also develop antisocial behavior. So the effectiveness of the authoritative style. This is again, this is what you want. Um, you model caring, concern, confidence, and self-control. The child will internalize the control that is fair and reasonable. They'll adjust demands and autonomy to the child's abilities and build competence and foster self-esteem. This predicts maturity and adjustment across temperaments. So it doesn't matter. saying that if you have an authoritative style of parenting, that regardless of what temper your child has, there are always the best outcomes with this style of parenting. So we can successfully modify maladaptive temperaments, and this builds resilience, meaning they have the ability to adapt and to cope when stressors throughout life occur. Questions about that so far? Does anyone reflect on how they were raised and think, yeah, I feel like my parents did a good job? They were authoritative.
My parents were more authoritarian, but I don't think I turned out to be a bad person.
Oh,
I think I turned out to be a pretty level-headed person. I don't know.
hmm. So what does that mean?
Like my well, basically they were just like, you do as I say, don't ask questions. And
Yeah,
then
but
like,
I'm saying the outcome that you had is different than what was just addressed in the slides. So what does that mean?
I guess I guess perhaps it means that like I'm more
Not you.
oh
It's not about you. The bigger picture. What's,
uh
what's the lesson?
the lesson is maybe it doesn't matter.
Right, that it's not everything, nothing is 100%. There's always
Yeah, yeah,
exceptions, exactly.
yeah.
So cultural variations in child rearing. Chinese, they withhold praise in the context of reasoning. They will shame misbehavior and they will provide physical punishment. Hispanic, Asian Pacific Islander, and Caribbean, firm respect for parental authority, high parental warmth. Low socioeconomic status African Americans, strict, immediate discipline, warmth, high in warmth, and reasoning. Child maltreatment, physical abuse, right? These are assaults that inflict physical injury, sexual abuse, fondling, intercourse, pornography, and other forms, neglect, failing to meet the children's basic needs, emotional abuse, social isolation, unreasonable demands, humiliation, intimidation, and others. Factors related to child maltreatment, the parental characteristics, like so their individual personalities, their experiences, their backgrounds, um, that thing. The child's characteristics, the family's characteristics, the community, the culture, all of these things have an impact on whether or not the incidence of abuse is going to occur. The consequences of child maltreatment, the emotional consequences, poor emotional self-regulation, impaired empathy or sympathy. They don't adjust well. So these are going to be behavioral issues like substance abuse, violent crimes, learning consequences, impaired working memory, which is problem solving, executive function, low academic motivation, and then physical consequences, central nervous system damage. We're talking about the brain, impaired cortisol regulation and stress response. We're talking about the fight or flight response. How do we prevent child maltreatment? Intervening with high risk parents, providing social support to families like Parents Anonymous, conducting home visitations. That's what Healthy Families America does. And then when parents cannot change, you separate the kid from the parent. Okay, I'm going to stop recording and then we're going to review for the exam. Does anyone have any questions about that first?